All right. All right, me. So it is actually the same August day. I'm just wearing a different white shirt now, but it's like 9 o'clock at night, I think. But I have finished reading Dan Brown's Inferno, which is the 4th book in the Robert Langdon collection. This one is more so about, and I think uses a very good literary trope of we are taking a specific instance of literature and modernizing it, but also referencing the old piece of literature in doing so, right? So this is a much a modernized version of Dante's Inferno, but also just the rest of the Divine Comedy, right? We have some dealings with purgatory and paradise. So yeah, right? I mean, obviously, I was very interested in this book. I read it in one day after having finished the last 100 or so pages of the previous Robert Langdon book, Dan Brown book. So obviously I really like this. I do think the Divine Comedy is actually a very interesting piece of literature and piece of media. It was something that was very much hated by the students that I tried to teach it when I was up here in Indiana. It was also very much hated by the teachers that were down in North Carolina that I was with. But I think it's a very, very fascinating, very, very interesting piece of literature. So yeah. This book, Inferno, I think does some things very, very well, and I think that there are things where just like there's too much going on here, right? I think that this is a much better payoff of that there is this is really 1 to 2 people kind of masterminding this whole situation, in which you have what ends up being 2 different characters in Zobrist and Sienna that are kind of masterminding this whole operation for the vast majority of it, right? And so I think this works a lot better as this, you're unraveling a whole mystery that's surrounded around 1 to 2 people's actions, rather than, you know, the Lost Symbol, which was, it was only one main antagonist, but there never felt like there was a reason why that person was so powerful to begin with, other than you know, point of revenge, versus this, where I think it makes a lot more sense. I think it's also a very, very, I always think that like going the disease route or going the infection route is always a bold choice to go, because it becomes so much more, it's another one, right, where like releasing a plague on humanity, because it is for everyone, it doesn't feel as personal, and therefore there has to be a lot more build up in the action leading up to it, rather than what the end goal is, right? And so for that, right, in that instance, right, this is another one that was like, because the end goal, although is by far the biggest of all of them, is also so impersonal to everything. It's also an issue of like, yes, I understand that people and human beings are animals, and therefore it is technically our job and part of our system that we want to repopulate and we want to, you know, continue surviving as a species. I get that. However, I also think it is, from a humanity standpoint, a very hard thing to go like, well, if you're infertile or if you're sterile, you're not useful as a human being. It's kind of a wild route to go down, I think. Which to me is what kind of gets implied at the end of this, right? So yeah, that's kind of a weird. I understand what the point of it is, right? Because infertility or sterility is an issue that is, right, if you choose not to have children, that is one thing, but to have that choice completely ripped away from you is a different issue, right? And that's what ends up happening here. But then everyone's just kind of okay with it. Kind of a weird thing. Yeah. I do have to say, like, I think it is perhaps the biggest issue with this book is the same issue that I have with like a lot of thriller type or mystery type novels, is that because there are so many of them, that creating a new unique twist on something becomes so difficult to make work. And so like you're constantly having to set up and then tear down and set up and tear down new things. And so the book begins with this really great premise, I think, which is that you have Robert Langdon, who throughout the first 3 books has been relying upon this incessant eidetic memory and having this really great knowledge of, even though he's, out of his comfort zone, he has an understanding of where he needs to go. Versus this book, which takes the really interesting, approach of your character that is all about their memory and all about using their intellect, has some sort of retrograde amnesia in which he can't remember the past, however many hours. And I think that as a concept is really interesting, and I think makes a lot of sense, because then we get to kind of find this balance of someone who's usually very much in charge and in control of things is now lost, but also then has, recreations of meetings or meeting with people that he's met before, and they're confused as to why he's acting the way that he is, right? And I think that's a very interesting take on this character, right? So I think that's great. And then the problem is that we get about halfway through the book and it is twist after twist after twist after twist after twist. And it just feels like, and I get it, Dan Brown, I get it, because there is just so many different things going on all at once, right? If you had simplified this to Robert Langdon doesn't have his memories, and it turns out that the girl that he's been, the Bond girl effectively is actually masterminding a huge part of this, but now wants to also take it back. I think that's enough twists, right? That's 3 different things that you're doing on this story. But then you also have these twists of this is all a cover-up, that the person that he thinks that he's supposed to be also rescuing, and Sineski, I think is the last name, and Dr. Sineski is actually working with this other agency that is trying to protect him, but he doesn't know that he's trying to be protected. But then also Sineski looks like she's been kidnapped for a huge chunk of this, because she's constantly like slumped over in the back of cars, and as you're reading from different characters' perspectives, right, you're reading it as that she is also kidnapped within this. But it turns out that she just has extremely bad vertigo, I think it was, and so she needed to take medicine that made her incredibly drowsy constantly once they landed in Florence. And so it's just like, right, that's another huge, you know, kind of thing, in which it turns out that, oh yeah, all these things that he's been running from, he's actually not running from. You have this whole point of issue in which you have a character that you think absolutely has the plague, but it turns out that he's just allergic to latex makeup that he had to put on earlier because of an earlier trick that they pulled on Robert Langdon. And then, you know, obviously you have the big finale one, right, which is that, you know, once again, spoiler alert for a book that's now 12, 13 years old, but that this huge virus that they think they're stopping isn't actually a virus that's going to kill anyone. Instead, it is a virus that's going to rewrite DNA to then where 1/3 of the population, like in the Black Plague, is just not going to be born, right? Oh, you also have the twist that this date that they're all rushing towards, they all think that they have to meet, is actually the date of globalization, in which every person is going to be infected with this, not the date where it needs to be stopped by. So it's already happened. You know, there's lots of things like that, right? Of where it's just like, we get it, Dan, we get it. But yeah, I think partially because of what the book is based around, right, is I had a lot more fun reading this than I had The Lost Symbol. Really, even to an extent, the Da Vinci Code. Yeah. You know, Dan Brown tried to write a girl that's not incredibly attractive and incredibly smart, and is also not like, oh, woe was me, I'm so unique, challenge level impossible. Yeah, I'm trying to think if there's anything else. Yeah, I don't know. I guess we'll have to see how Origins reads, which I'll probably just end up reading tomorrow. And then there's the new one that's coming out this year. I don't know when, but I don't know. I think that's my thoughts on this.